All right, we are live this morning, Pastor Johnson over at Trinity Manila and broadcasting over to Zion Manning and Manila. And I think we're in Fort Dodge today. Is that right, Keith?
That's right, so far.
So we've got Keith Haney from Iowa District West and still relatively new. How long have you been in the district, Keith?
A little over a year.
A little over a year. Great. So Keith, could you tell us what your role is at the district?
So I basically cover three areas: missions, stewardship, and human care. And so I'd say the bulk of my work is with missions. So helping churches figure out how to do ministry in the community. Also working with new plants. Right now we're focusing on, especially this year in this season, multi-ethnic, because that's kind of where God's moving in our district right now. We have a lot of ethnic opportunities with Sudanese, with Hispanic. So we're trying to develop those partnerships with congregations. So, but also work with stewardship. So I'm helping the congregation to do Ramsey Plus, also work with stewardship programs, and human care is kind of a catch-all. We do with human wellness. We also deal with things like the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, I jumped into my human care hat and tried to give churches resources for streaming and alternate worship sites and all those kind of things. So.
Sure. Well, when you were saying all those different hats that you have on, I wanted to say, that's it.
That's right. Well, now communications too. So I had that one.
So Keith, you're still pretty fresh to Iowa District West. What were you doing before you joined the district?
So I worked in a district office in Northern Illinois for 12 years. So there I started out as working with missions with four of the facilitators. As about probably 6 years into it, my role shifted in Northern Illinois to work with calling congregations. So I helped with 50 congregations find pastors. Wow. So it was kind of interesting to kind of learn how that side of the church body works.
There you go. Yeah, they don't teach you that in seminary.
No, and I had to go back and actually redo a lot of the things that we were taught, because a lot of pastors don't deal with that very much. So
sure. And what congregations have you served at in a pastoral role?
So my very first congregation was a church called Berea in Detroit, Michigan. Served there for 2.5 years, then moved to a ministry in St. Louis called the Luther Plan, which was 4 urban inner city congregations. And so I was a pastor at St. Matthew and St. Stephen's in St. Louis. Then I was senior pastor in Milwaukee for almost 8 years, and then a district office in Northern Illinois.
So you love the Midwest.
Well, I've been blessed to serve in I'm from the South, so I've been I say I'm a Southern boy trapped in Midwest for the last 20 some years.
So the incredible thing and why you are such a blessing to Iowa District West is you have sort of all these sort of unique experiences helping congregations be organized and think about long-term ministry plans. When you think about like a Trinity Manila or a Zion Manning, what are some encouragements that you would give congregations like that as they do ministry?
Sure. One thing I discovered, because I had lived in a pretty rural area in Illinois, oftentimes congregations think, well, we don't have any new people around us. So we don't really have ministry. What I would tell congregations is you always have ministry. Sure. The thing is, what are the needs and hurts in your community? And because I just talked to a rural pastor who was kind of feeling that way. It's like, I'm in a rural area. We don't get a lot of new people. We don't have an influx of, new people buying homes. But they did decide to do a prayer walk in their community. And what happened from that was they discovered that a lot of people in their community weren't able to buy food. And so they started a food pantry, a food ministry to connect with their neighbors who were just hurting. But they didn't know that was a need, even though it's a small rural community. I mean, you think if you're in Iowa and there's a bunch of farms around you, food's not an issue, but that was an issue in that community. So the other thing that was an issue that they ran across was there was loneliness in those rural areas. And so he realized that we really do have an incredible ministry opportunity, even though it may not look like we have a bunch of new people moving in. There are a lot of people that are not connected to Christ and to each other. And that need for community, even in a small community, is really important for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've just finished up a book, and it's almost dated now, by Gabe Lyons about the next generation of Christians. And one of the things that he stressed was a need for Christians to be restorers. So not so much about focused on doing things for people in order to get them in the door, but just doing things for the sake of doing things.
Right.
And I thought that was a really powerful point. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you're connecting people to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also discovered as I did some demographics just in Iowa in general, the number one thing on most people's minds is finances.
Mm.
A lot of people are just concerned about finances. And so there are opportunities for the church to teach biblical stewardship to people. Sure. When I was in a parish, one thing I discovered, because I was in a poor urban area, was my members didn't plan for future. They didn't have wills. They didn't have estate plans. They didn't have health insurance, life insurance. They didn't have burial insurance. So when those events happen in life, it puts stress on the family. So I took it upon myself as a pastor of that congregation, that community, was to teach my people how do you set up the next generation and yourself so you have some sense of comfort as much as we can. Of course, it's all about God, but we can do things in planning to make sure that we prepare ourselves for that transition. So,
sure. Yeah. I mean, you're already taking a very stressful event and adding more stress to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. As you served in different circuits, as you served in the Illinois district, and I know Illinois has got several districts, but what are some other unique ways you've seen congregations serve?
I think I always start with figure out who your neighbors are, because the danger congregations run into is, well, I saw that this worked really well at the neighboring church, so let me just take their vision, take their mission strategy, and let's just spruce it up and make it our own.
Yeah.
But every community is unique. Every community has unique opportunities, a unique things. So I always tell congregations, discover your uniqueness. Discover what your gifts are, because God placed you in that particular place, in that location, because you have the very unique skills and gifts and people makeup that make what you do uniquely qualified for that community. So I try to help congregations figure out what makes us unique and special, and how does that uniqueness and our gifts and our passions compare to the needs in our community? Because asking a congregation to radically change to do something doesn't usually work out. Just like we don't radically change ourselves to do things. So I always get congregations to figure out who you are, figure out what the needs of the community are, and you'll find out oftentimes that you're already doing things, just need to maybe adapt a couple things here and there to be more effective in ministry. So don't radically change, but just kind of figure out what unique gifts does God have for us as a congregation.
Sure. Yeah. So there's obviously a sameness to what we do. Our starting point is always Word and Sacrament ministry. And yet Manning is not Manila. Manila is not Manning. And, these two cities are not other cities in Iowa either. So, why, or maybe not so much why, but how has God strategically placed us to now strategically serve people in unique ways?
Right. Like for example, I just did a vision thing for Trinity Oterboat.
Sure.
And it was what was unique about Oterboat was the community there. The people said, we like the American traditional values. We like the comfort of those values. We like a church that holds true to those values. So we don't like a lot of shifting and changing in your worship. We like things to be consistent. We need consistency. Now, that's not for every community, but for Oterboat, that was important. They wanted a church that lifted up the American family traditional values. Now, if you're in Des Moines, in a very diverse area, that may not be the case. They may want something different. So that's why I say don't assume that if I go and throw out the organ and bring in a guy with guitar and flip-flops, I'm going to reach the community. Because that may not be what your community wants.
Absolutely.
Not that the guy with flip-flops is bad, but just it may not be what your community wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so many cool things going on here. So one of the things you had mentioned is stewardship, and one of the really neat features the district has access to this year is Ramsey Plus, which is this kind of giving us resources to Financial Peace University, which is something Trinity's done and Zion's done. But for people who may not know, what exactly is Ramsey Plus?
So Ramsey Plus is Dave Ramsey has put together a series of kind of calls it a university. I think he may have changed the name, not being a university anymore, But the goal is to help people kind of take classes to kind of graduate to that level of debt-free independence, and when you can use your resources as a blessing to God into his kingdom.
Sure.
So Ramsey Plus has all kinds of tools like baby steps to kind of help you on your financial journey.
Sure.
If you're farther along than just say the baby steps and you've kind of met Ramsey's 7 steps, then he talks about how can you get prepared for legacy giving, where you paid off all your debt. And now think about how can you be a blessing to the 3rd, 4th, 5th generations of the church and with your family. So we help people no matter where they are on a financial journey, whether you're trying to get out of debt, whether you're trying to, pay off the last little bit of where you're at, or just better plan for the future. This tool will give all your members the opportunity to kind of figure out where they're at. And when you sign up for it, we have like 1,000 licenses for the district this year. So however churches decide to do that, it could be individuals or a church with a license. But however you do that, when you sign up, they give you a quiz to kind of figure out where you're at in your journey. Do you have an emergency fund? Do you have a 3-month, a 6-month emergency fund? Do you have debt? And gives you a plan to advance along those steps toward debt-free living.
Sure. Which is just so vital because so many of our relationships are affected by our finances. And so when that's not sort of healthy, if we have or if it's so out of whack, then obviously that has implications for our other relationships too.
Yeah, and the stress of it, when you're financially strained, you're stressed, and it creates stress in your marriage and your family. You can't enjoy the Cardinals baseball game if you're all stressed out.
Yeah, you're a Cardinals fan.
That's right. Yeah.
I was afraid you were in the Cubbies territory. So.
No. The Cardinal fan trapped in Cubby territory.
Well, and that's just, and the other piece of it too is when finances are in order, that also, it's not just so much the health piece of relationships, it is that, but then it also moves you into generosity too, which the more and more I find being able to have that in my life, it is so freeing. It is, it feels good. So being able to be freed up to do the generous piece is neat too. And I think Financial Peace University and Ramsey Plus do a really nice job of stressing that.
Right. And I think as you think about what that looks like, because when you can do that, it is such a blessing in your life to be able to have the resources to bless other people, especially when there's so much need around you. It's a really thing. Like we've adopted in our own life. For the last 5-6 years, we've adopted a kid overseas. So through Compassion International, we've sent kids through all the way up through high school. And so right now we have a young man that's in Brazil. No, actually Uganda. We had our last one was from Brazil. So it's kind of nice to kind of be able to help those kids and write letters to them and get letters back. So
yeah. And I guess that, and that's kind of cool because going back to the uniqueness, I mean, obviously we've been placed in the United States, so we have financial resources. So as the church, we can now strategically help others in other places of the world who maybe their resources are different than ours.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool to see the church being able to, it's not just our local congregations, but it's also the church as a whole.
Right.
That's really neat. So, Keith, in terms of, as we kind of finish up our time together, how can congregations reach out to you to get that sort of support that you offer in terms of helping congregations figure out what God has called them to do?
So the best way to do that is probably connect with me through my email, keith@iowadistrictwest.org. And I can set up a time to come out and do a demographic study or a vision retreat with congregations. The demographic thing really kind of helps you drill down and be able to identify who are the unchurched in your community.
Sure.
And figure out exactly how your unique gifts and skills as a congregation apply to the needs of your community. So it really helps to kind of go, okay, I see that person. And sometimes you could even see that you'll have some of those people in your congregation. Most times you will. And if you don't, then maybe the people in your community are very different than your congregation, but you have some things in common. So I hope you try to figure out what do you have in common with the people in your community.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Keith, we really appreciate your time this morning, and we appreciate you coming into our district and all the resources and background that you bring. So you are a tremendous blessing to us, and we appreciate you. Really quick, just an announcement, announced it Saturday, but Trinity members, we will not be having a Lenten service here at Trinity, but you're encouraged to go worship at Zion Manning at 5:45 and do Lent there. But then we'll get back into our worship schedule back on Saturday, 4 p.m. So Lord be with everybody, and we want to thank Keith again for being with us.
My pleasure.